You ever get that feeling? Like something bad is about to happen and your gut knows before your mind catches up? That was me. I didn't know what exactly, but I felt it in my bones the second we pulled into the driveway. The birthday party was at my sister Kendra's house, which honestly looks like a Pinterest dream threw up everywhere in the best and worst way. Balloon arches in perfect pastels, a dessert table that could have been on a baking show, matching t-shirts for her twin boys that read Born to Rule. Every inch of the place screamed, "Look how perfect we are." My daughter Isla clung to my side. She's 7, a little shy in crowds, but she'd practiced her happy birthday in the car twice, with a nervous little grin each time. She wore her favorite glitter headband, the one she said made her feel like a galaxy princess, and held 2 handmade cards, each with doodled stars and crooked hearts. We hovered by the food table. My husband Daniel made awkward small talk while I kept my eyes on Isla. Kendra gave us a half-hearted, "Hey, didn't even look at the cards," Isla held out. My mom smiled tight, like her face might crack if she used an actual expression. My dad gave a single grunt and went back to carving roast beef like it was surgery. Then came the gift bags. One by one, each kid got a customized bag. Names in gold letters, plush toys, bubble wands, water bottles with vinyl decals, glow bracelets. The kids tore through them like it was Christmas. Then they handed one to Isla. Plain white paper. No name, no decoration. Just a crooked sticky note slapped on the front in Kendra's handwriting, "Try harder next year." At first, Isla just blinked at it, confused. Like maybe it was a joke she didn't get. She opened the bag slowly. Inside, a broken crayon, a used eraser, and a peppermint that looked like it had been lost in a purse for a year. That was it. She glanced at me, then at the other kids. Her small hand reached for mine, like she needed grounding. Like maybe she thought she'd done something wrong. Then the laughter started. Kendra laughed first. That high, sharp laugh she uses when she's trying to prove she's just joking. She waved a hand like it was no big deal. "She's been acting up lately," she said, like Isla was some wild animal to be trained. Interrupting, getting emotional. "This is just a little wake-up call." My mom chuckled. "Honestly, it's good for her. You coddle her too much." Even my dad let out this grunt laugh hybrid, like it was all awkward but harmless. The other kids laughed too, not because they understood. Kids don't need a reason. They just follow the adult's lead. Isla tried to smile, that shaky, lip-trembling kind of smile that kids make when they're trying not to cry in public, like she didn't want to embarrass anyone. Daniel crouched down beside her and gently took the bag from her hands. "You don't need this," he said. "Let's go get some real cake." We didn't make a scene. No yelling, no tears. We just took her hands and walked out like the house was on fire. And maybe, in a way, it was. No one followed us. No one called out. Not even Kendra. Back at home, Isla curled up on the couch, still clutching the birthday cards she'd made. She looked at the stars she drew and whispered, "Was it because I didn't say thank you fast enough?" My chest physically hurt. "No, sweetheart," I said gently. "It was because some people forget how to be kind." She nodded and held the cards against her chest like they could protect her from the world. She fell asleep under the soft throw blanket Daniel gave her last Christmas, the one with stitched words. "You are safe. You are strong. You are loved." Daniel made tea in the kitchen. We didn't talk much. "We didn't need to. This isn't new," he finally said, placing 2 mugs on the table. "Just final." I nodded. There wasn't anything left to say. "I paused everything," he added. "The rent supplement, the grocery cards, utility top-ups, all of it." My hands moved automatically to the drawer where we kept the just-in-case folder. I pulled it out. I'd been quietly adding to it for years. Screenshots, emails, Venmo receipts, photos. One from the time Kendra asked me to babysit for a week so she could go on a self-care retreat. One of a message where our parents promised to pay back the property tax I covered. Right after their cruise, I slid the sticky note, "Try harder next year," into a plastic sleeve, right on top. Daniel watched, said nothing. But when I looked up, he nodded, not like he was agreeing, but like he'd been waiting for this moment too. The next morning, we'd drop something off. No confrontation. No dramatic monologue. Just the truth. They wanted to teach my daughter a lesson? Well, They were about to learn one too. We didn't sleep much that night. Isla drifted off eventually, curled up in a protective little ball on the couch, her fingers still wrapped around the glittery birthday cards she'd made for her cousins. She looked so small and so brave, like she was trying to protect herself with paper stars. Daniel and I stayed in the kitchen. We didn't say much, just sipped tea and let the silence settle. It was the kind of silence that stretches between two people who already know exactly what the other is thinking. Around 4:00 a.m., I opened my laptop. The folder was already thick, but that night, I added more. Messages from Kendra, screenshots from our family group chat times they joked about Isla being too soft or too much like her mom. One voice memo from 2 Christmases ago, when my mother, not realizing Daniel had hit record while filming a family moment, leaned in close to Kendra and whispered, "Don't bother getting her anything nice. She never appreciates it anyway." They were talking about me. By 6:00 a.m., it was all printed, sorted, labeled. I bound it with a piece of crimson ribbon I found in the junk drawer. From one of Kendra's old birthday parties, ironically. It wasn't planned, it just felt right. At 7:15, we loaded Isla into the car. She was still half asleep, head resting on her favorite stuffed fox, the one with the bent ear. I didn't tell her where we were going. She didn't ask. We parked 3 houses down. Daniel walked up to Kendra's porch. He didn't knock, didn't even hesitate. Just placed the folder gently on her doormat, rang the bell once, and walked back. We were halfway down the street when it happened. The scream, sharp, raw, like someone had ripped something straight out of her chest. I flinched. Isla jolted awake. "What was that?" "Just a loud noise, baby," Daniel said softly as he turned the wheel. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Later, we found out the neighbor had stepped outside in his robe, thinking someone was hurt. When he saw Kendra on the lawn, face blotchy, clutching the folder like it was radioactive, he called the police. She tried to say it was harassment, told them I was attacking her reputation. But when the officers flipped through the folder, they told her there was nothing illegal about it. Just a whole lot of truth. Civil matter, not criminal. Nothing to escalate. By noon, my phone was buzzing nonstop. 38 messages from Kendra. The first few were classic all-caps rage. "What the hell is wrong with you? You think this is funny?" Then came the guilt. "We're family. You can't do this to us." Then the begging, "Please. Don't ruin everything over a joke." Then, of course, the threats. "If you don't take this back, you'll regret it." I didn't reply. Around 3:00, my mom called. 4 times. On the 3rd call, she left a voicemail. "You've taken this too far. This family has always had its issues, but you just lit a match. What do you want from us?" She sounded more annoyed than sorry. So I sent the digital copy of the folder. To everyone, aunts, uncles, cousins. No dramatic message. Just a simple subject line, in case you ever wondered why we stopped showing up. That evening, I got 20 replies. Most were short, one cousin said. "I had no idea." Another, "I always thought something was off." And one that just read, "Good for you." 2 weeks later, the real fallout began. The landlord followed through. Kendra had 30 days to pay the full rent or face eviction. The agreement had always been unofficial. Daniel and I covered the difference quietly to keep the peace. Now, peace wasn't part of the deal. Next came the car. We were the ones who signed for her lease. Kendra had defaulted twice before. This time, we didn't cover it. The loan company flagged her account. Her credit took the hit, not ours. Daniel got the email and just nodded. That's one thing off our shoulders. Then my parents called. But not me, Daniel. "She won't talk to us," my mom said. "Maybe she'll listen to you." He didn't sugarcoat it. "She's not doing this to you," he told her. "You did it to yourselves." The next morning, they showed up at our house. Isla saw them through the window and froze. Her face went pale, her body stiff. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. "We just want to talk," my dad said. "This is getting out of hand." "No," I replied. "This is what accountability looks like." My mom tried to cry. The kind of tears that show up when someone wants to win a conversation, not because they feel remorse. I didn't budge. Before they left, they dropped a card in our mailbox. One of those sympathy ones with flowers on the front. Inside, it said, "We miss our family." I sent it back. No note. Just the sticky one from Isla's gift bag, reattached to the front. Try harder next year. That night, Isla sat on the couch reading a library book about comets. She looked so peaceful, her face soft, not tense like it used to be. Were they mad? She asked quietly. I took a breath. They were loud. She nodded. That's not the same. And somehow, she was right. Loud doesn't mean right. Loud doesn't mean love. Later that night, we went out for ice cream. No celebration, no speeches. Just soft serve and silence, the kind that finally felt safe. And for the first time in years, we all breathed easy. For about a week, it was quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. Like the kind of stillness right before a storm hits. Everyone had gone silent, but you could feel the heat building just below the surface, resentment simmering, waiting for its next crack. Kendra didn't text again after that last string of messages. My parents didn't try to show up uninvited. And for a brief moment, I thought maybe it was over. Maybe they'd finally gotten the message. That maybe, just maybe, they would stop. They didn't. 10 days after we left the folder on Kendra's doorstep, Isla came home from school with a pastel envelope in her backpack. It had little hearts printed along the border, like something from a dollar store. Valentine's Day set. Inside was a folded sheet of lined paper. The note read, "If you ever feel sad or confused, remember Auntie Kendra loves you. You can call me anytime, even if your mom says no." A phone number was scribbled underneath. Isla handed it to me, her brows scrunched in quiet confusion. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. That question again. And just like before, I felt something twist inside me. But this time it wasn't sadness. It was fury, low and cold. This wasn't just boundary stomping. This was manipulation, direct, intentional, and pointed straight at a 7-year-old. I called the school immediately. Turns out, Kendra had shown up pretending to be dropping off a little encouragement gift for her niece. No ID check, no oversight. She'd used one of her friends' names to sign in, slipped it into Isla's classroom mailbox like it was totally normal. That afternoon, I filed a formal no-contact order with the school and district. I emailed the principal. I looped in the superintendent. I spoke to a school board liaison. Then I called a lawyer. The cease and desist letters went out 2 days later to Kendra and to my parents. There was no drama, just facts. Violate this, and we escalate. That should have been the end. But some people can't let go of their story until they rewrite it. And Kendra? She wanted to be the victim. That weekend, an anonymous account started tagging me on social media. Old, blurry photos of me from childhood. Captions like, "Some people forget who raised them. Just remember, kids grow up. One day she'll know what you did." The bio read, "Family is forever, even if you turn your back on it." It was childish, petty. But what made it dangerous was the way she wrapped it in sentiment, trying to guilt me through nostalgia. Like weaponized memory. Daniel and I documented everything. Screenshots, metadata. Sent it all to our attorney, who forwarded it to local law enforcement. Harassment is harassment, even when it hides behind pastel filters and hashtags. Then came the tears. Not from Isla, from Kendra. She posted a crying selfie. Makeup smeared, puffy eyes. Caption, "When your own sister destroys your life because of a misunderstanding, please be kind. You never know what someone is going through." The comments rolled in. "Sending love, Mama. You deserve better. Blood is thicker than drama." But the thing about the truth? It has a funny way of finding its own voice. Quietly, one of my cousins shared the folder link in the comments. Then another sent voice memos from family events. A third chimed in with screenshots of group chats, ones I wasn't even in, where Kendra mocked. Isla's meltdowns, said she was spoiled and broken like her mother. The illusion cracked. People started asking questions. An aunt commented, "Why wasn't she invited to Grandpa's birthday last year?" No answer. Someone else replied, "Didn't Kendra borrow money from the family emergency fund twice last year?" Seen, but never responded to. A distant cousin posted, "So the birthday party story is real?" 3 people quietly left the group chat. The next day, my parents deactivated their Facebook. Kendra deleted her account entirely. And just like that, the noise went mute again. A week passed. Then came the letter. It arrived on thick paper with my mother's monogram on top. Blue ink, handwritten, 3 pages long. She started with family. Family is messy. We made mistakes. But at the end of the day, we're all we have. Then guilt. Don't punish everyone forever for one bad decision. Your daughter will regret this distance one day, and so will you. Then the plea. You don't have to forgive, but you don't have to burn every bridge either. I didn't reply. Instead, I bought a simple frame, placed the letter inside, and hung it on the wall beside Isla's drawing from art class, a swirling mess of galaxies, all done in shades of lavender and teal. Then, right below it, I tacked the original sticky note from that gift bag. Try harder next year. That was the bridge. Burned, framed, archived, but not forgotten. Because that note wasn't about a party. It was a message, a pattern, a lifetime of quiet jabs disguised as jokes. It was every moment I'd swallowed for peace. Every time I taught myself to be small, quiet, accommodating because being kind felt safer than being honest. I was done with that, and Isla, she was changing too. She made 2 new friends in her art class, Lily and Ava. Sweet girls, the kind who didn't laugh when she covered her ears in loud rooms, who waited for her to catch up when she fell behind, who offered crayons without being asked. She started sleeping through the night. Her shoulders weren't constantly tensed anymore. Her eyes didn't scan the room every time she said something, like she was waiting for someone to correct her tone. One morning, while brushing her hair, she looked at me in the mirror and said, "My heart doesn't feel buzzy anymore." I smiled, choked up, and said, "That's good, baby. That's really good." That night, we strung up fairy lights above her bed. She picked the kind that shift colors slowly, like breathing. Her breathing had changed too. Softer, quieter, steady. And for the first time in a long, long time, mine had too. The end of the school year came faster than I expected. Maybe because life was finally quiet. Not numb quiet like before, but the kind of quiet where you can think again. Where you can breathe without your chest clenching. Where a Tuesday feels like a Tuesday, not a battle. Isla had started humming to herself again. Just soft little tunes while she brushed her teeth or packed her school bag. She sang to the cat, drew constellations on napkins. She even taped one to the fridge and called it the Galaxy of Brave. It was a drawing of 3 stars, 1 big, 2 small. "It's us," she said. "Me, you, and Daddy, together." There was a calmness about her now. Not the fake kind where kids pretend to be fine, but real calm. Like her nervous system had finally been given permission to relax. I didn't realize how much of her I'd been holding together with my own threadbare patience, until she started holding herself. One afternoon, she brought home a flyer for Family Day at school. Every student could invite 1 adult to come see their art projects and eat cookies together. "Just 1?" I asked, surprised. She nodded. "They said we get to choose, so I picked you." "Are you sure?" I asked. "Dad would love to come too." "I know," she said, "but I want you to see my painting first." Family Day fell on a warm Friday afternoon. I took the day off, dressed in jeans and her favorite color sky blue. She said it made me look happy. Her classroom smelled like glue sticks and crayon shavings. Kids were buzzing around, showing off their creations, paintings, clay projects, paper sculptures. Isla led me to the far wall. Her project was a canvas covered in layers of swirled paint lavender, teal, navy blue. In the bottom corner, in thick black strokes, she'd written, "Safe is better than big." I just stood there for a second, letting the words settle. "That's what I learned this year," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Our house is smaller than Auntie Kendra's. But it feels better. I feel better." I crouched beside her. "You're right," I said. "You're so right." On the way home, I asked if she wanted to stop for ice cream. "Of course," she grinned, then paused. "Mom? Yeah, you did the right thing." My throat tightened. "Even if they say mean things? Even if they never talk to us again," she added. "You still did the right thing." She leaned back in her seat and looked out the window. That was it. No fanfare, just certainty. And in that moment, I realized she hadn't just healed. She understood. She understood that love without kindness isn't love, that family without respect is just noise, that boundaries aren't punishment, they're protection. Later that night, I checked my email one last time before bed. There it was. One new message. From Kendra. No subject line, no greeting, just 6 words. Are you happy now? You won. I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I closed the laptop. No response. No reaction. No need. Because she was wrong, I didn't win. I walked away. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. The next morning, Daniel found me organizing the old file cabinet in the hallway. I was sorting through piles of paperwork, tossing out receipts and manuals we didn't need anymore. He held up an old Christmas card from my parents, one of those generic ones with glittery trees and a typed message inside. There was a sticky note tucked into it years old, faded with time. I hadn't seen it in forever. Don't blow it. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how small those words looked now. How small they looked now. I tossed the card in the recycling and kept sorting. We were making space. Physically, emotionally, room for better things. Later, Isla helped us string up new lights in the backyard. She picked soft white ones that looked like stars when the sun went down. We grilled dinner, just the 3 of us, and ate outside under the fading sky. She told us stories from school about a girl in her class who wore a cape for a week straight and insisted she was descended from unicorns. About how her art teacher cried when she read the quote on Isla's painting. Daniel raised his eyebrows at that. You made a teacher cry? That's gotta be worth at least 5 gold stars. Isla laughed. A real one. Loud and unfiltered. And I realized that sound, that moment, that was what healing looked like. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was grilled cheese under fairy lights. It was a child laughing with her whole chest again. It was enough. Then something else happened. Something small but telling. My cousin Mia messaged me. We hadn't talked in a while, not since before everything went public. She had always kept her distance from family drama, choosing politeness over proximity. Her message was short. Just wanted to say, I get it now. I wish I had spoken up sooner. If you ever need anything, I'm here. And that meant something. Because for every person who turned a blind eye, there were others who finally started seeing clearly. Not because I made them, but because silence stopped working. Summer came slowly that year. The kind of slow that felt earned. Long afternoons, warm breezes through open windows, quiet laughter in the kitchen. Isla started waking up early, not from nightmares, but to check on the garden she and Daniel had started in the spring. Tomatoes, sunflowers, lavender in mismatched pots. She named the plants after her favorite book characters. Sometimes I'd catch her whispering to them. Stories about her day, about the girl in her class who used glitter glue like currency, or about the art project that was taking on a life of its own. Her feet were planted now in the world, in herself. And mine? I was starting to feel the ground under mine, too. I didn't think healing would look like this. I thought it would feel like fireworks. A grand reveal. Something loud and cinematic. But instead, it was moments. Quiet and consistent. Isla sleeping soundly. Daniel humming while making breakfast. The 3 of us folding laundry while watching nature documentaries. Nobody walking on eggshells. That was the win. Not revenge. Not triumph. Just peace. Still, every now and then, the past would knock on the door. Not literally. More like a shift in the wind. A comment from an old friend. A photo memory popping up on my phone, my sister's birthday 3 years ago. Isla in the corner of the frame, trying to look small. Or a group text I forgot I was in, lighting up with wedding photos or announcements. I stayed silent in those, watching from the margins. They no longer hurt. But they reminded me of who I used to be, the girl who kept showing up, hoping this time would be different. I don't miss her. I grieve her. But I don't want to be her again. One afternoon, Isla asked, "Why don't we see Grandma anymore?" She wasn't sad, just curious, like she'd finally noticed a gap she wanted filled with truth. I sat down beside her and thought for a second. I think Grandma and I see the world really differently, I said. And sometimes when people don't want to understand each other, they end up hurting each other. She nodded slowly. Like how I don't like when people touch my hair without asking. Exactly, I said. That's your boundary. And people who love you should respect that, even if they don't like it, especially then. She was quiet for a moment, then smiled a little. I like our kind of family better. I smiled too. Me too. Weeks passed like pages turning. Soft and steady, Daniel got a small promotion at work. Nothing flashy, just a bump in title and a quieter schedule. We celebrated with takeout on the living room floor, Isla building a tower out of chopstick wrappers. I started writing again. Nothing serious, just small essays, reflective pieces, things I hadn't made time for in years. For the first time, my words didn't sound like I was trying to prove anything. They just sounded like me. And I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. What I felt was closer to grief than rage. Grief for the family I tried to build inside a family that never saw me. Grief for the child I was, always straining to be enough. For the silence I carried like a shield. But the anger? That had burned off. What remained was clearer, cleaner. I didn't wish them harm. I just didn't wish to carry them anymore. Then came the voicemail. I almost didn't listen. It came through at 10:42 p.m., the kind of time that usually brings bad news. It was my mother. Her voice sounded tired, not weak, just worn. She didn't apologize. Not really. But she said things I hadn't heard before. I don't know what you needed from me back then. I thought I was doing my best. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I didn't see it. She paused. You were always different, and I didn't know how to be soft with that. I only knew how to survive. That's what I thought love was, preparing you for a hard world. Another pause. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I think about it. About you, every day. That was it. No grand declaration. No promises. Just a message from someone who was beginning to look back for the first time. I didn't return the call. Not because I was angry, but because some wounds don't need reopening. Sometimes, acknowledging that they existed is enough. I saved the voicemail, not as a keepsake, as a reminder. People can change, but it doesn't mean you have to wait for them to. A few days later, Isla was invited to a birthday party by one of her new friends. She hesitated at first. I don't want another weird bag, she said. Her voice was casual, but I heard the edge underneath. You won't, I promised. But if anything feels off, we leave. No questions. She nodded. We went. And it was perfect. Messy cupcakes, giggling kids, a magician whose rabbit almost escaped mid-show. The gift bags were simple but sweet stickers, markers, a pack of gummy bears. No glitter names, no sticky notes, just kindness. That night, while brushing her teeth, Isla said, that party felt warm, like it didn't care if you were quiet or loud. I kissed her forehead. That's the kind of party you deserve. She rinsed and looked at herself in the mirror. Maybe I'll have a party like that someday. You can have anything you want, baby. She nodded. Even if it's small? Especially if it's small. She smiled. That was the first time I saw her face without that layer of guardedness. She wasn't bracing anymore. She was just being. And me? I started saying no more. No to things that drained me. No to invitations that came out of guilt instead of joy. No to apologizing for being the kind of mother who says, let her be, instead of she'll grow out of it. Every time I said no, I made space for more yeses. Yes to spontaneous ice cream runs. Yes to Friday movie nights on the couch. Yes to peace, even when it felt unfamiliar. Because what I learned was this: peace doesn't announce itself. It's not a grand entrance. It's a quiet decision made over and over again. To stay soft, to stay kind, to stop chasing people who only offer crumbs and call it love, to raise a child who doesn't have to recover from her childhood, and to let that be enough. Fall came like a soft breath, the kind of season where the air starts to whisper and the light changes just enough to make you pause. School was back in session. The lavender plants in our yard had begun to brown, and Isla started using bigger words: consequence, respect, boundaries. She used them with purpose, like she understood not just what they meant, but why they mattered. Sometimes I forget she's only 7. Then she'll crawl into bed with a stuffed animal under one arm and whisper, "Will you tell me a story from when you were little?" And just like that, she's my baby again. I told her one once about how I used to pretend the moon followed me home, that I'd watch it from the back seat of the car and think it was a quiet guardian in the sky. She got quiet after that, then looked up and said, "Maybe the moon followed you because nobody else did." I didn't respond. I just held her tighter. Some stories aren't told in words. Some are written in what we don't pass down. There's a kind of love that doesn't need to be big to be real. That doesn't dress up as perfection, it just stays. Listens, holds steady. That's the love I chose to give Isla. Not loud, not flawless, but safe, and safe is enough. I heard from my parents one more time. A letter. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. My father's neat, slanted, like he used to copy it from newspapers as a kid. Inside, it said, "We miss you." The door's still open. Just that. Nothing more. I didn't respond. Not out of malice, just certainty. Some doors stay closed because we finally understand what's on the other side, and what it costs to keep walking through them. Daniel built a bench in the backyard. Nothing fancy, just some reclaimed wood, a can of sealant, and a couple of afternoons. He placed it under the old elm tree, where the sun hits just right in the late afternoon. One weekend, we sat out there with hot cocoa, Isla between us. A book in her lap she wasn't quite reading but flipping through slowly. "I like it here," she said. "Why's that?" Daniel asked. "Because nobody makes me feel small. That stuck with me. It's wild how children can name the things we never had the words for when we were their age." I started volunteering at Isla's school, not because I wanted to hover, but because I wanted to show up, the right way, to be one of the adults that made the room feel warmer, not smaller. And I watched other kids too, the quiet ones, the squirmy ones, the ones who needed a little more time or a little less noise. I saw them in a way I wish someone had seen me. And when I did, I saw Isla watching me, learning, mirroring. The cycle wasn't just broken, it was being rewritten. Sometimes I still get emails from extended relatives, a cousin's baby shower invite, a birthday reminder, a group photo from some gathering we weren't at. I glance. I delete. Not out of spite, just alignment. We're not on the same frequency anymore. Once, I might have tried to bridge that distance with performance. A smile, a polite reply, a gift card to keep the peace. Now, I let the space be. Isla asked me once if she'd have to forgive Kendra someday. She was sprawled across the rug, coloring a picture of a dragon with wings like flower petals. She asked it casually, like she was wondering about the weather. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Forgiveness is your choice, not a requirement. And it doesn't mean letting someone hurt you again." She nodded, thoughtful. "But what if she says sorry? Then you listen," I said. "You listen with your whole heart. And if it still hurts, you get to say, 'Thank you, but I'm not ready.' That's still love." She nodded again. "Okay, that makes sense." She went back to her drawing. And I let that be enough. Time moved forward, like it always does. We weren't healed like a perfect story. We were healing like real people, day by day, memory by memory. Some days I still felt the urge to explain myself, to draft the perfect message, to clear the record. But then I'd see Isla laughing over spilled paint or Daniel humming to himself while making dinner. And I'd remember, this is the record, this life, this peace, this wholeness. No sticky notes required. Isla had a new project at school. About me posters. They were supposed to draw themselves, list their favorite things, and write one sentence that described who they were. She asked me to help cut out some glitter letters. She picked gold. When she was done, she showed it to me proudly. In big, bold letters at the bottom, she wrote, "I am brave and soft, and both are strong." I didn't even try to hide the tears. She hugged me tight. "You helped me be this way." No reward in the world could beat that moment. And now I'll ask you something. If this had been your child, what would you have done? Would you have walked out of that party too? Would you have said nothing or said everything? Would you have stood still for the sake of family or moved for the sake of your child? People say blood is thicker than water. Maybe that's true. But I've learned love is thicker than both. So I'll leave you with this. I didn't walk away to win. I walked away to break the chain. To show my daughter that protecting her peace was worth more than pleasing people who only knew how to take. And maybe one day she'll sit under a tree with her child and pass that same story forward. Or maybe she won't have to, because I already did. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If it touched something in you, or reminded you of something you're still carrying, I'd love to hear your story too. Drop it in the comments. And if you ever wondered whether you were doing the right thing for your child, even when it felt heavy, let me be the one to say, you are, and you're not alone. Story 2. When my family threw me a graduation celebration, I was ecstatic. However, the cake box said, "Congratulations, loser," when I opened it. My parents chuckled as though it were a joke. I didn't. I got up, gathered my belongings, and left. But not before doing this action. For the first time in my life, I felt my parents were proud of me, so they contacted me in a panic 3 weeks later. The house was adorned as I entered. Real decorations, silver and blue streamers. Across the living room is a banner that reads, "Congratulations, Ryan." This place was populated. Neighbors, family, and even some of my dad's coworkers. There was also food. Actual food. Not simply pizza from takeaway that was haphazardly placed on the table. They did something for me that I had never seen them do before. Not for anything. For Jake, yes. They threw him a lavish celebration, invited all of his friends, and even purchased him a brand new laptop as a gift when he was admitted to college for the first time. They continued to pretend as though he had done nothing wrong until he failed out a year later. Never once did they yell at him, but nothing for me. No acknowledgement, no festivities. I was always the one in charge, the one who didn't require care. Every time I achieved something, they told me that. And yet, here I was, in a home that had been specially furnished for me. My mother drew me into an embrace. She smiled as if she truly meant it. "We're very proud of you, honey," she remarked in a kind and loving voice. "This is significant." I blinked. I wasn't even sure how to respond. I had suppressed the disappointment of never being good enough for them for so long. And now, perhaps now things were shifting. Perhaps I had accomplished something they could be proud of at last. My father laughed and gave me a pat on the back. "The family's first college graduate. Take a look at yourself." For the first time in my life, I smiled. I allowed myself to think. Now, they could have noticed me. Perhaps I was at last more than a passing idea. My brother was in the corner of the room, looking through his phone without focusing on anything. Normal. I wasn't bothered by that, though. Not right now. It was my day. A drink was presented to me. There was a toast. People shook my hand, smiled, congratulated me, and inquired about my future intentions. I was ecstatic. The cake was then presented. It was large and opulent, the sort that you order ahead of time from a real bakery. My mother smiled as she carried it in and placed it in front of me. My father nodded toward it and smiled. "Feel free to look." Still feeling light. Still smiling. Still trusting in this moment, I leaned in. I read the words after that. "Well done, loser." I felt as though I had been sucker-struck since my stomach fell so quickly. I pondered for a moment. This isn't possible. This must be an error. Then the laughing reached my ears. My dad was the first to giggle, followed by a full-on laugh. He thought this was the most hilarious thing he had ever seen, trying to hide it behind her palm as if it weren't so horrible. My mom also laughed. And Jake, hunched down, clutching his stomach, almost gasping, was dying. "Come on, please." Upon viewing my face, my father exclaimed, "It's a joke." Jake grinned. "Ryan, please stop seeming so surprised." "It's funny, you know. I felt foolish. A total moron. Naturally. This wasn't genuine, of course. They weren't proud of me, of course. For what reason would they be? Why would they alter?" I looked around the room and noticed that some individuals were looking at one another uneasily, but nobody said. Nobody defended me. Not one individual. The sickness rising in my throat was swallowed. I'm forcing myself to remain, made a joke. To them, I was just that. Something settled within of me. It wasn't rage, not as they had anticipated, nor was it melancholy. Something sharper was involved. Something more lucid. I took the glass in my hand and raised it gently and purposefully. There was a small hush in the room. Everyone is observing. I was waiting to see my reaction. I gave my family a grin. "Even though you were always precisely who I believed you to be," I remarked in a pleasant voice. I nodded toward the cake and decorations as I added, "The laughter died down to this party. It took a lot of work and careful consideration. I will always remember that." There was a long pause. My mother shifted uneasily. My father's smile wavered, and looking ahead, I remarked, raising my glass a little. Since you've always treated me well, I've now figured out how to treat you in the same manner. Nobody said anything. For a few moments more, I maintained eye contact. Allow the tension to grow. Allow the discomfort to seep into their bones. I then finished my drink all at once. Carefully placed the glass on the table before turning to face the door. Before leaving, I picked up my bag and swung it over my shoulder. I took one final look back. Jake was now observing me. He smirked, although it wavered a little. My father cleared his throat. "Ryan, please stop being so dramatic. It's only a..." I grinned. "Oh, and something else. But you'll discover it in due time." I then left through the door. No crying, no shouting, no tantrums. Nothing but quiet. As I departed, I was followed by a heavy, oppressive quiet. I could tell the uncertainty was already beginning to sink in without even seeing their expressions. They were attempting to dismiss it, telling themselves that I was being overly sensitive, that I would go past it, that I would return. They were unaware of what was about to happen. However, they would. They would in due time. They never wanted me as a son. Jake was, since the time we were children. He could clearly do no wrong. He was the favorite and the golden child. My parents lighted up for it. The one they pampered, shielded, and defended. They had opportunities 2, 3, and 4. Regardless of how severely he messed up and me, it was me they put up with. I used to question why. Why was he so much more worthy than I was? What was it about him that I didn't have? I put a lot of effort into my job. I had decent marks. I avoided getting into trouble. I completed everything correctly. Nevertheless, they rejected me. It began modestly when I was 6 years old. I participated in the school spelling bee. I was waiting for them to say something when I returned home, grinning and clutching my small certificate. Anything. That same day, Jake had scrawled some lines on a sheet of paper. My mother praised it, hung it on the refrigerator, and referred to him as her little artist. My dad's hair was tossed back, claimed to have genuine talent. With anticipation, I held out my certificate. My father gave it a quick, unimpressed look. Spelling. That isn't a true ability. When my mother smiled at me, it was a preoccupied grin. That's lovely, honey. But just don't boast. I wasn't boasting. All I wanted was for them to see me. I had given up by the time I was 10. At school, Jake got into problems. The instructor was being unjust. In the home, Jake broke something. Jacob, that was an accident. Poor grades. Ryan is hardly the only geek. I was being rude if I even rolled my eyes at them. I was being ungrateful if I asked for something. They gave Jake a huge celebration when he started college. My dad hardly looked up from his phone when I arrived in. I didn't care, I told myself. I mean, I didn't really need their approval. However, a tiny, foolish part of me continued to hope. I hoped that one day people would notice me if I simply kept my head down, worked hard, and proved myself. They would be proud one day. Then came college. I knew better than to count on their tuition assistance. I didn't even inquire. I was awarded a scholarship. To make ends meet, I took out loans and worked part-time. Jake, despite barely graduating from high school. Nevertheless, my parents were really delighted when he was accepted into a mediocre university. Whatever you need, we'll be here to help. My mother had informed him, and they did. Paid for his education, purchased an automobile for him, sent him cash each month. Jake barely passed his tests, missed school, and partied his way through his first year. He dropped out entirely after the second year. What about my parents? They were never angry with him. He was never held responsible. In fact, they felt sorry for him. The pressure was excessive. My mother had shook her head. Most likely, we pushed him too much. Pushed him. With the exception of the actual slap in the face, they gave him everything. The moment when something inside of me finally snapped, they began organizing his second opportunity. To get him in again, they located another college, called, and pushed strings. They assured him that things would be different this time. They assured him that they would continue to provide for him, cover his necessities, and see to it that he had a flat near the university. They then informed me that I would be co-signing his lease. As if it were a given. As if it were my duty to ensure Jake had housing while he was given another opportunity. Your credit is excellent. It won't cost you anything, according to my dad. Just a signature, that's all. I should have declined, but I chose not to. The words came out of my lips before I even considered it, since I was so accustomed to performing their expectations of me. Yes, all right. It was hardly acknowledged at all. I simply expected that, as usual, I would follow suit. Jake didn't express gratitude, didn't even recognize my assistance to him. And that's when I knew it would never end. For them, I would never be sufficient, no matter what I did. My dad would have shrugged if I had walked the moon. Jake would have joked that I was trying too hard, and my mom would have smiled graciously. They just didn't care. Not that they didn't notice me. And I thought, perhaps this time is different, as I entered the graduation celebration and saw the banner and decorations, as well as my dad's handshake and my mother's grin. Perhaps they're proud this time. They chuckled when they gave me that cake. I was also aware that they would never respect me. That was okay, though, because they would never utilize me again after that night. Before leaving that residence, I made one final phone call. Not until I did the one thing they didn't anticipate. Not until I made sure that, after 3 weeks, they would be the ones phoning me in desperation and pleading with me, recognizing that they had finally done too much. It took them 3 weeks to discover what I had done. I first disregarded their calls. Not with malice. Perhaps a bit, but primarily because I didn't give a damn. I had jumped at their requests for years, responded whenever they wanted anything, and gone above and above to prove my value to individuals who didn't care about me. When my mom departed, that's when the missed calls began to accumulate. WTF? You need to address this. Jake's texts went from man to voicemail after voicemail. I simply left them unread and unanswered. The more I ignored them, the worse it got, since I already knew why they were calling. Mom was the first to try the worried method. Something strange is happening in Jake's flat, honey. Could you give me a call? Then the fictitious bewilderment. Did you overlook anything in the lease, Ryan? You are no longer listed as his co-signer, the landlord informed Jake over the phone. Then followed the angry voicemails from Dad. How on earth did you accomplish that? You promised. This has to be fixed. Give me a call back. And lastly, Jake. The phony worry was not his doing. Made no effort to be courteous. He immediately became enraged. I was let down by you. Take care of this right now. When I read that one, I grinned. I had one last task to complete before leaving that party 3 weeks prior. I immediately went to my car, took out my phone, and dialed the landlord's office number. I had formally withdrawn from being a co-signer. Jake's lease suddenly had no value, and now? He was now learning the hard way. All of them had thought it was finalized. I was already on board. I had always fulfilled their expectations after all. I never asked about it, never retaliated. They believed that I had not changed. However, they ought to have been more aware, because I knew I had to stop being their doormat as soon as I saw that cake, and now they were dealing with actual repercussions for the first time in their lives. It was also lovely. On day 22, I finally picked up the phone. Before answering, I let my dad's number ring twice, then waited for the blast while sitting back. It took very little time. How on earth did you accomplish that? I listened to his tirade a little while. I moved the phone away from my ear. You committed yourself. You promised. You have to take immediate action to fix your brother's lease, since it is going to expire. I remained silent, didn't dispute, didn't provide an explanation. Allow him to exhaust himself. He finally understood that I wasn't interfering. He fell silent for a moment. Then he fell into that low, menacing tone of speech that he usually used to make me feel bad. You must assume responsibilities and act like a man. I nearly laughed at it. Accountability. When Jake failed school, where was this speech? They threw him money and he squandered it, while he skated by on excuses throughout his life. After a deep sigh, I finally said something. No, I doubt I will. Quiet. On the other end of the telephone, I could almost hear the skepticism cracking. What? I said. Calm, steady, I said again. No, I doubt I will. Then, like a dam bursting, the quiet dragged on. You're a touch self-centered. I ended the call. He returned the call right away. I let it to ring. Jake then made an attempt. I also let that one go. Next, my mother. And since I was previously aware of how things would proceed, I picked up this time. She began softly. We must speak, my love. Unimpressed, I hummed. We. She let out a sigh as if I were being crazy. I am aware of your distress. We are all aware that the celebration did not proceed as planned. I sneered. Are we referring to that? A gathering? She disregarded the irony. However, Ryan, this is serious. The future of your sibling is at stake. It nearly made me chuckle. What will happen to him? They've never given a damn about mine. Without their assistance, I had fought my way through school. I worked myself to the bone, borrowed money. And where did they stand by Jake? They now wanted me to make sacrifices for him as well. I spoke in a calm, measured tone. I believe Jake will find a solution. She became agitated. You are aware that he cannot obtain approval on his own. Ryan, that sounds like an issue with him. She made another attempt. Now a bit crisper. Family does this. No, I remarked, and at last my voice became impatient. I spent years doing this. What did I receive in return? A cake, it stated. Well done, loser. Keep quiet. The first genuine quiet. I left it there. Allow her to absorb it. Then I whispered, and you're starting to see what a huge error it was. Her breath caught. It was only a joke. I grinned. This is also the case. I hung up after that. I waited for a while, half anticipating another call, but I kept my eyes on my phone. They were silent for the first time in my life because they were aware. They understood my seriousness. Furthermore, they were aware that they had ultimately pushed me too far. The greatest thing, though, they had yet to see the extent of their error, so this was not even the finish. Because I had done more than simply revoke a cosign, they would soon be phoning me again and pleading. I had left everything behind, and Golden Boy was going to lose everything without me there. It was many days before they called again. It didn't surprise me. It's likely that my dad had yelled at me about how unappreciative I was. I think my mother had sobbed because I was destroying the family. Jake as well. For the first time in his life, Jake was not receiving what he wanted, so he most likely pouted and threw a fit. There was one more thing they hadn't yet grasped, though, so I knew it wasn't over. And the actual fear would begin when they did. There wasn't much waiting for me. My phone buzzed on a Friday night while I was relaxing with a beer and some solitude. Jake. I let it ring and grinned. He made several attempts. I eventually answered the sixth phone, maintaining a casual tone of voice. We believed we were finished here. His voice was loud and desperate. How on earth did you accomplish that? I sipped my beer slowly. Give further details. The cash. Ryan. The funds for tuition. It's gone. It was there. This was the bit they still hadn't worked out, so I grinned. You see, I had pulled out of more than just the co-signing. It was all of it. For years, I had been providing them with financial support, covering minor expenses, loaning money, and compensating for late payments. I never received payment. And they casually offered that I help out when they began organizing Jake's second attempt at college. Now you're doing fine, my father had remarked, as if it didn't matter. You ought to support your family. They assumed that I would agree even if I hadn't. As usual, they thought that I would follow suit. I thus took the one unexpected action. I interrupted them entirely. They never received the tuition deposit they were anticipating from me. I used to make the payments for them. Lost. I had unwittingly been their silent financial safety net. Disappeared. They were drowning now. Jake's apartment was gone. His second shot at school was now in jeopardy. Because he had nothing without my credit, my money, or my assistance. I had never felt lighter, too. You don't get it, Ryan. Jake continued to yell in my ear. The school made a call. According to them, the money was never processed. There's not enough for me to cover it. I'm going to lose my place. I gave a little hum. Oh no, that is awful. Quiet. Then his tone became piercing. Make it right. I laughed at it. In fact, laugh. It was amazing how profound his entitlement was, really. Despite everything, he still believed that I owed him anything. Are you serious? Shaking my head, I said, You promised to assist. He lost his temper. No, I made the correction. You thought I would. Significant difference, he spluttered. Parents stated. I interrupted him. Yes, they undoubtedly did. See, though, I don't give a damn about what my parents say. The calm grew longer, then more subdued. He attempted another approach. "Ryan, you are aware that this is my final opportunity?" It was there. The knowledge that he was truly screwed, the desperation. I relaxed my voice and leaned back. "Yes, I am aware of it." He took a swallow. "Thus, I dragged out the word as I spoke. You'll find a solution. My dad had told me that after he depleted my education cash, when I needed anything, when I was struggling, or when I had to fight my way through life without their assistance, they would always say that. Additionally, they may now sample it as well." Jake finally snapped. "You're such a resentful jerk. Are you only punishing me with this?" "No," I answered in a silky voice. "I finally figured out how to treat you the way you treat me, which is why I'm doing this." I gave that some thought. I hung up after that. My mother did it the next day. Before I could even say hi, she was weeping. She sniffed. "Ryan, we must speak." I let out a sigh. "No, we don't." With tears in her eyes, she replied, "Jake is going to lose his spot." "You're not understanding. I completely get it." She inhaled deeply. "We're all being punished for a dumb joke." I grinned. "I'm finally treating you the same way you've always treated me, Mom." She gave a quiet gasp. She was genuinely upset by that. She wasn't only calling for Jake, I realized for the first time. They were having financial difficulties without my help. So she was phoning for herself as well. All the tiny things I used to hide, the times I unknowingly helped them out. The effects were really being felt by them now that I was gone. "You must pardon us." She made an effort. "We are related." I exhaled a little in amusement. "It's funny that you only say it when you're in need." She paused. "Please, Ryan." Now, I could hear the sincere fear in her voice. Their entire way of life had fallen apart because I had left. And it wasn't just Jake's second shot at school, as I had no intention of returning. Because I had finally been pushed too far by them. I waited a while more for the stillness to fade. Then I finally said something. I said in a firm voice, "I don't know anything about you. Final. No more." I then hung up for the final time. After that, I didn't talk to them again. Of course they tried. For months, the calls continued. The pretended apologies, the guilt trips, and the requests for a final favor. However, I had already decided. And I selected myself for the first time in my life. Jake did not return to school. He lost his spot after the deposit deadline passed. There was no fallback plan because my parents had exhausted all of their resources attempting to sustain him and were unable to come up with the money in time. A cousin told me that he was forced to return home and was confined to our parents' house. A fully grown adult who dropped out of college with no employment, no degree, and no prospects for the future. Really, that was poetry. They have been underestimating me for years. The one they ridiculed and disregarded. And now it was me who turned to go. And it was they who were abandoned. Story 3. My parents said that since they needed the money for my brother's schooling, they would not cover my life-saving medical care. Fortunately, my aunt saved me, but I did this in secret, and they later regretted their decision for years. When I realized my life wasn't worth the cost of a college degree, I was 15 years old. I can still picture my mother sitting at the kitchen table across from me, her hands folded as if we were talking about dinner choices rather than my life or death. As usual, my dad stood silently behind her, his arms folded. They had just hung up with the insurance provider. I was aware that the care was not covered. Although I was aware that it would be costly, I also believed that they had savings. Enough, but not a lot. They had brought it up several times. "What now?" I asked. My mother gave me that strangely composed expression she usually had before she was going to say something terrible. "The course of therapy will not be continued." I didn't comprehend at first. I assumed she was implying that they were awaiting further information or that they needed a second opinion. I was perplexed but not yet afraid. "What are you saying?" I inquired. She sighed softly, as if I were making things more difficult than they had to be. "We've discussed it, sweetie. If it's meant to be, God will make it happen, according to your father and me." I blinked. "What?" At last, Dad said something. "Caleb, we can't afford to spend all of our money on this. Enrolling in college the next year, his housing, his tuition, and his future. Everything is set up. That cannot be thrown away. Discard it." I gazed at them. For a moment, I was unable to even breathe. I wasn't gullible. I knew Caleb was always given preference. The golden boy was him. He received tutoring, summer camps, and new clothes. In solitude, I ate the remnants. But I didn't think. In reality, I never thought they would let me die. You're going to college instead of me. I spoke in a low voice. My mother seemed nearly insulted. Don't use that phrase. It's not a decision. We simply have faith in God's plan. My heart was beating so loudly that I could hardly hear it as I sat there. I wanted to hurl something, weep or shout, but I refrained. Rather, I got up, walked to my room, and shut the door. For the remainder of the evening, I stayed indoors. They didn't knock. That's when it dawned on me. I was going to be on my own if I wanted to survive. I then turned on my laptop. I began searching on Google. Is it possible for a kid to renounce their parents due to medical neglect? If I'm in foster care, how may I receive free medical treatment? Is medical care a part of juvenile detention? I'm serious. I genuinely thought about committing a crime serious enough to land me in jail for a few minutes. Not too awful, though. I would be imprisoned indefinitely. I assumed that there must be some sort of medical treatment in jail. I was desperate at the time, which seems absurd now. I learned that I could request emancipation, but doing so often needed a judge's decision or parental approval, both of which would take time that I lacked. There were shelters, but I didn't want to go to a stranger, and they were either too far away or filled. Then I remembered my mother's older sister, Ruth. Her residence was around 40 minutes distant. She was hardly seen by us. She used to be discussed by my parents as if she were a depressed little failure, claimed to work part-time as a tutor for children who barely passed, and to live in a small apartment. They made fun of her for never getting married and for wasting her money on takeout and stray animals. However, I recalled her kindness. She made it a point to talk to me whenever we did see her, not just to tell her you chat, but to really talk. She gave me the impression that she saw me and cared. Thus, I didn't get in touch. Not quite yet. I wasn't prepared to seek assistance. All I wanted was to make it through the night. I brought my concept, some clothing, and a bag, charger. I took the small amount of money I had stashed in a closet jar, perhaps a total of $70. After midnight, I waited. Hear the floors in the hallway creak. I departed after hearing their bedroom door click. As simple as that. No note was left by me. I didn't bid them farewell. It took me 5 blocks to locate a bench close to the 24-hour supermarket. I sat there pondering for a long time. I reflected on my past belief that my parents loved me. I reasoned that perhaps they still cared in their hearts, even though it wasn't the way they loved Caleb. Before Caleb began middle school and everything changed, I recalled how my mother used to read to me at night and hold my hand when I was a child. As I sat inside cleaning dishes, I reflected on how my dad had taught him how to drive and how I now most needed them. They decided that he should spend that money on my brother rather than a stranger or a neighbor, and not only for college-related purposes, as though that were somehow more important than whether or not I made it to 16. Up until the sky began to brighten, I sat on the bench. I refrained from crying. I simply made plans because I had no intention of returning. I was going to find a way to survive without them, no matter what came next, what I had to do, or where I had to go. That first night, I didn't sleep. The sky turned from black to gray and then to gold as I watched. When the sun rose, on the sidewalk I was passed by people with coffee cups, dogs, and suits. Some of them had their heads down. Nobody gave me a look. That's probably what affected me the most. How inconspicuous I was as a little girl carrying a rucksack on a seat. Nobody paused to inquire about my well-being. I didn't think they would. I was accustomed to being invisible. It has mastered it. Not in a theatrical, depressing sense, just in a subtle, rehearsed manner. I know how to blend in with the background. How to take up as little space as feasible. That's what it had been like at home for as long as I could remember. My parents weren't abusive in the manner people assume. They didn't beat me, shout at me, or put me in a closet. They were not obliged to. Completely ignoring someone is a kind of violence in and of itself. On his birthday, my older brother was the talk of the town. I believe the spotlight suddenly turned on him for good, and I was an afterthought when I arrived 2 years later. Of course, they would never say that aloud. They would claim to love us equally while grinning. But with your eyes closed, you could see right through the deception. There was a family emergency when Caleb became ill. Everyone halted their activities. When he won a scientific fair, I was urged to relax and drink some tea when I became ill. My folks hosted a party. When I won a writing contest and came in second, my mother said, "That's good. Can you set the table now, sweetie?" Big moments weren't the only ones. It was the consistent, little decisions. Every semester, Caleb received new shoes. Nike is a well-known brand. Before the heel split, I wore the same pair for 2 years. When he turned 13, he received a laptop for school. It hardly turned on when I acquired a hand-me-down. He took driving lessons. I was informed that we would sort it out later, and I thought that someday it would be my turn. I thought that if I worked hard enough, kept quiet enough, and showed myself enough, they would notice me. I tried to get their attention for years, as if it were a scholarship. I once received a flawless report card in 7th grade, all A's. I presented it to my father, feeling hopeful and pleased for once. "That's expected of you," he remarked, glancing at it. Caleb's accomplishments are more significant since he struggles harder. It was as if someone had taken my breath away. After that, I didn't show him my grades. Birthdays were also different. There was always a celebration for Caleb. Presents, balloons, and a beautiful cake with his name inscribed in blue frosting. My 15th birthday, Mom forgot. "Oh, happy birthday" was the only text message I received. Apologies. A hectic workday. I recall reading it after school while sitting by myself at the bus station. While I waited for my transport home, I ate a cupcake that I had purchased from the cafeteria. I wasn't quite numb, but I wasn't upset either. I never imagined they would let me to die, though, despite everything. That's the part that occasionally still feels unreal. Even if they didn't love me as much as they loved Caleb, I still believed they did. I reasoned that they would intervene if my life depended on it. They didn't. He was their choice. All right. However, it wasn't about a birthday, a school excursion, or a pair of shoes this time. I lived it, and they ignored it as if it didn't exist. I made an effort to convince myself that they were afraid, perhaps because they were overwhelmed or didn't comprehend the diagnosis. However, I had witnessed their features become composed and resigned. They had been aware of their actions. What made me flee was that clarity, not just dread. That residence wasn't safe for me. They wouldn't save me, not because they would harm me. So I took off running. And suddenly, I had $73 in cash and a rucksack full of clothing sitting on a park seat. I was still unsure about my destination. I simply knew that I would not be returning. I considered giving my school counselor a call. However, I was aware of the outcome: child services and required reports. Foster care, perhaps worse. Even well-intentioned mechanisms don't always safeguard children, as I'd read enough news reports to know. Then I remembered the only adult in my life who ever made me feel important, Ruth, my mom's sister. It had been over a year since I last saw her. My folks didn't enjoy having her over, claimed that she was judgmental and pessimistic. In actuality, I believe she simply made people uneasy by seeing right through them. She was never a believer in the ideal family role. At the age of 10 or thereabouts, I once heard my mother talking to Ruth on the phone. They were having a disagreement. "We're doing fine, Ruth," my mother responded. "You don't have to give us parenting advice." Ruth's voice was clear and piercing over the speaker. "I'm not giving lectures. I simply want to know why Elena appears to have gone weeks without receiving a hug." I was hit hard by the sentence, since it was accurate. Even then, she noticed me. And now, with nothing but fear in my chest, I'm sitting on a park bench with the morning sun warming my back. I came to a realization. I trusted no one else in the world but her. I had no idea what to anticipate. Perhaps she would allow me to spend a night or two on her couch. Perhaps she would help me find a social worker, apply for assistance, or figure out how to talk to someone. Ruth was impoverished, so I didn't have any higher expectations. I was constantly reminded of that by my parents. "She has trouble caring for herself. My dad lives like a hermit," he would mutter. "You should feel fortunate," my mother added. "We supply what she is unable to." They were not credible to me. Not at all. However, as I took my phone out of my pocket and gazed at her number, their words began to replay in my mind. As I dialed, my hands were shaking. Once, the phone rang. Twice. Then she took it. "Hi there?" As soon as I opened my mouth, Tears began to burn at the corners of my eyes for the first time since I moved out. "Ruth," I said, "it's me, Elena." I waited for her to inquire about the issue, to come across as perplexed. He didn't. That's what she said. "You're where?" I'll never forget the 2 words she said when I told her. "Remain there." He was on his way. 10 minutes later, she arrived in a faded red car with one window that was partially down. I almost broke down when I saw her. I felt as though I had lost the ability to stand, and my legs were numb. Before she could properly park, I picked up my bag and headed for the car. She exited, looking at me from head to toe as if to confirm my identity. I had no idea what to anticipate. Shock questions, maybe even a lecture, but she didn't say anything. Just opened her arms and I walked into them like I'd been waiting my whole life to be held. She didn't ask why I was there. I didn't ask what happened. She just said, "Let's get you warm." We drove in quiet most of the way. I gazed out the window and she didn't press me. That's what I'd always enjoyed about Ruth. She never forced closeness. She made place for it. Her flat was tiny, really tiny. It was one of those older buildings with creaky floors and windows that shook when the wind blew, but it smelled like cinnamon and clean washing. And for the first time in days, I felt something close to safe. I offered to sleep on the floor so I could simply crash for one night to max. She didn't even reply to it, just gave me a pair of silky pajamas and said, "You're taking the bed. I've got the sofa." I didn't argue. It was not something I possessed. I cuddled up behind an old comforter that smelt like mom that night and let the warmth to seep into my bones. I slept for the first time since the diagnosis. I heard eggs breaking in the kitchen when I woke up the following morning. It had been a while since I had heard that sound. In the house! A granola bar and a warning to keep the counters tidy were part of breakfast. Ruth did not inquire if I was hungry before passing me a plate. It wasn't until I started eating and was halfway through that I realized how hungry I was. "Are you ready to tell me what happened?" she eventually said. I went cold. I didn't know how I was going to say it. I still felt as though I had made it all up. I gulped, set down my fork, and filled her in on everything: the diagnosis, the doctor's visit, and how my parents sat me down and went over everything word for word. They wanted to leave everything to God, but we can't afford both of them. As I spoke, her expression remained the same, but I could see how her shoulders became pointed and rigid, and how her grasp tightened over her cup. I explained to her my research that evening, how I looked up whether I would be eligible for free therapy if I was a state ward, how I considered getting arrested in order to receive care, and how, when none of that seemed right, I packed my bags and fled. She remained silent for a while after I was done. "You're not going back there," she said. There was no question. I stared at her, uncertain. "However, your apartment, not much space." "You don't, I know that." He interrupted me. "Don't be concerned about what I lack. Be concerned about your survival. The rest will work out." Something broke inside of me that morning, but I didn't weep. She didn't say it, so I didn't realize I'd been holding it up all this time. "Let's consider it." "I'll give them a call," she didn't say. She remained silent. "I'll see what I can manage." "You're not going back," she said, as if it had already been determined, as if she had known it from the first time she had answered the phone. She began calling that afternoon. A list of physicians was given to him, specialists at the clinic. She inquired about payment schedules, informed them of the truth. She is 15 years old. Her parents don't make the payment. I will discuss what I can. She didn't flinch when one establishment gave a number that made me queasy. She just responded, "Okay, thank you," and nodded. She then went on to make more calls. I heard her asking a friend whether they knew someone who could be interested in buying a modest condo, splitting an apartment, or subletting a room. The next day, I observed her pulling a folder from a drawer and going through documents.actions. Accounts for retirement, bonds. Silently, she sat compiling lists while using a calculator. I made an effort to stop her. "You don't have to do this, Ruth. This isn't your duty," I said. She gave me a glance. "Your pie with your family. I don't care about my parents anymore." She was done. She spoke steadily and calmly. "Yes, you are. That's the only important thing." She would list her apartment for sale by the end of the week. Although it was small, it belonged to her, paid for, comfortable. packed with memories, books, and broken mugs that she would not discard. She was also trying to sell it to me. She was never a big talker. Look what I'm giving up, I never stated. Never wept or demanded anything in exchange. Said that the sooner we treat you, the better. At that point, I broke. I wasn't untidy and I didn't cry. I didn't think anyone would do this for me, I replied, letting a single tear fall down my face as I sat on the couch. She arrived and took a seat next to me, did not speak up, simply grasped my hand. I laid in her bed that night and stared up at the ceiling, imagining how things could have turned out if I had stayed at home, had I waited, if I hadn't given her a call. I considered what my parents may say, whether they were aware of my whereabouts, what they would do if they discovered that someone else had taken their place. For the first time, I considered the amount of authority they had forfeited in making their decision. I was still here even if they had written me off, and I was going to stay here because of Ruth, life, restoring, observing. Though they were unaware of it at the time, they would soon have to face the consequences of their choice. I would take a course of action that would alter everything. The most difficult weeks were the initial weeks following the conclusion of my treatment. Recovery is often viewed as this magnificent ascent, as if everything simply improves and the worst is behind us. However, it isn't. It's sluggish and disorganized. There are a lot of negative effects, odd pains, and prolonged periods of feeling as though nothing is changing. Ruth took her time with me. She took care of the bills, cooked, cleaned, and sat quietly with me when I didn't want to talk and listened to me when I did. She handled my recovery as if it were the most significant endeavor ever. And somehow, gradually, I returned. When I stood for too long, my body stopped trembling. I could resist eating. I began chatting more, sleeping for more than an hour at a time, and walking farther every day. I had nothing left to offer her. Not at that moment, but I made a self-promise that she would never again be in need. Additionally, I sensed something else growing inside of me as I concentrated on strengthening myself. Nor hatred, nor rage, just this icy, firm understanding that I couldn't let what they did to fade into the background. They attempted to remove me. They had dismissed me as a poor investment. I was still here, though, observing, breathing, and healing. I thus began to consider how to make it significant. I didn't want a lengthy letter detailing how much they had wounded me, a yelling fight, or a viral post. I wanted the appropriate individual to be aware of the one person whose viewpoint they held in high regard. When I was growing up, there were always regulations in our home that made no sense to outsiders. For example, we were not permitted to dine in the living room on some nights, and my mother would purchase pricey wine that we were not permitted to open. It all came down to getting ready for him, Dr. Malcolm Avery. He was a revered, untouchable, former Ivy League dean, kingmaker, and head of the National Private Admissions Consortium. When I was 11, he once came over for supper. I was advised not to talk unless someone talked to me, and I wore a clothing that I detested. My mom was so anxious that she neglected to check the oven. Thus, I remember that night down to the smell of the overdone fish. He was shown a scientific project by Caleb. His jokes made my parents laugh too much. They continued to exclude their student success stories and client statistics. Their entire pitch was encapsulated in banter. Me? I was there to nod, smile, and keep silent. My folks buzzed like they had just seen God when he went. If we are able to gain Avery's trust, that's all it takes, according to my dad. They were fixated on that man's approval for the next 10 years. I started a blank email and wrote the truth when I was at last strong enough to sit at my desk without my legs trembling. Just the facts, no rants or sob stories. I introduced myself and said that I was the daughter of Victor and Melissa Hart, that I had met him once, and that I had fallen ill when I was 15. They had the money to assist me, but they chose to put it aside for my brother's schooling. I told him that I had fled, but my aunt took me in, selling everything she owned, including her house and funds, to ensure my survival. I informed him that my parents were still operating a company that was built on the foundation of a family that prioritized children and was characterized by love and morality. I've included documentation of a treatment facility rejection letter that details the precise cost of my mom's text message ordering Caleb to ignore me. When she's sick of acting out, she'll return. A screen grab of my father's handwriting. You can't risk everything on a whim. I concluded the message by saying, you should be aware of the type of people you are working with. Before pressing submit, I gazed at the screen for a while. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew that everything would change the moment I pressed the button. I kept Ruth in the dark. She didn't need to try to dissuade me or, worse, shield me from what would occur next. She had done enough already. I owned this section. It was clean and peaceful, private. After hitting submit, I shut down the laptop, inhaled deeply, and poured myself a drink of water with hands that were no longer shaking. I had no idea when it would begin. I wasn't even sure if he would answer. However, I was aware of the most important factor. To the only person who mattered in their world, I had stated just what they needed to hear. I didn't have to yell. All I needed to do was speak in the proper ear. Dr. Avery didn't get back to me. I didn't anticipate doing so. However, a few weeks after sending the mail, I became aware of an oddity: my parents' website's badge. The consortium's one was no longer there. It had always taken center stage. They boasted about it once. Always supported by Avery. He only collaborates with the greatest, they claim. I was just absent now. I looked through the directory of the consortium. Silently, their name has been deleted. Not a word, not a drama, only one clean cut. Then it started. Little things were involved at start. Once replete with 5-star ratings and laudatory comments, their business page began to lose its appeal. Some reviews vanished completely. They were abruptly removed from a speaking panel by a school with whom they had a strong partnership. They made less posts. They appeared to have tighter grins. Then the actual harm began. Postings that allude to unethical behavior and rumors in parent groups. One customer canceled their agreement and asked for a complete reimbursement. They attempted a name change, new packaging, and new branding. It was unsuccessful. The ringing of their phones ceased. There was silence in their inbox. Their clients abandoned them. Schools sever relationships. They're standing when the whole basis of their company had fallen silently. I was informed 6 months later that they were forced to close their office. They lost that as well after moving everything into their house. Someone asked if anybody knew of an inexpensive real estate agent after a couple in education consultancy simply defaulted, and I learned about it via a post on a local site. The address was the same. They relocated to a rental in a less desirable area of the city. Not quite together, but still. Not out of affection, but out of need. They reportedly argued all the time. Shouting was reported by neighbors. When the police were contacted, they remained together. Perhaps they were unable to pay. Perhaps they were aware that no one else would desire them. And I didn't say anything at all. I refrained from boasting. I didn't make contact. I constructed while observing. My teaching side gig became a full-time business by the time I was 19. My area of expertise was assisting students with their college essays, particularly those whose lives weren't picture perfect. I knew how to give their stories substance and significance. Word got out. Customers flooded in. I got Ruth on board for full-time administrative scheduling and email management. She had never made as much money in her life as I did. She didn't ever request a raise. Actually, I never asked for anything. She sacrificed everything for me, though, so I gave it to her nevertheless. I gave her a tiny, sunny home by a lake with a reading room and a leak-proof kitchen as a surprise for her birthday. She sobbed. Then I started crying. I then arranged for her to travel to Greece. She had a picture of Santorini pasted over her desk since she had always wanted to visit. She shared a photo from the vacation on social media, showing the water behind her while she smiled and held a glass of wine. The caption said, "Thank you for giving me a life, Elena, my lovely niece." I was afraid to dream about it. That post, which returned to them, was the one that altered everything. I have no idea how. It may have been shared. Perhaps they looked up my name out of habit or resentment. But as soon as they saw it, I knew. Because they began contacting me a few days later. Emails were used initially. "We are pleased that you are doing well. Let's get back in touch. We want to discuss." I didn't answer. Then the text arrived. The phone calls. I updated my phone number. Then I came across them one day. They arrived at a gathering. I was giving a speech at a small gathering of student mentors. They waited till it was over outdoors. They were there when I stepped outside. I nearly failed to identify them. My father appeared older. His clothing was ill-fitting. He was wearing old shoes. My mom's hair had gray strands, and her makeup looked sloppy, as if she hadn't used it in a long time. "Elena," I said. She said. Her voice broke. "Just a minute, please." I remained still. "We are aware of our error. We've lost everything, according to my dad." My mother came forward. Ruth's post caught our attention. "We were unaware of your progress. How giving you are." I gazed at her. "You're referring to generosity. Like covering the cost of someone's medical care to keep them alive?" I inquired. She winced. My father spoke once again. "We were afraid, we erred, we didn't consider." "No," I said. "You failed to think. I was deemed unworthy by you." My mother muttered that we were under strain. "We considered. Caleb. You're not hearing from Caleb either, because even he is aware of what you did," I added. Then they were silent. "Are you worn out?" "They didn't have many demands, just a little help," my dad remarked. We're struggling," I replied. "You told me you couldn't afford to save my life," after letting the pause linger. "I'm just giving it back." My mother shook and slipped. I turned around and left the curb in the direction of my car once my dad went away. They didn't comply. Ruth asked me how the conversation went later that evening. I assured her everything was all right. I didn't bring them up. Grinning, she made tea for us both and began organizing her next journey. "Where would she want to go?" I asked. He smiled. "A hammock somewhere warm." As we exchanged cups, I pondered. It's not the first time. I did more than simply get by. For the one person who ever believed that I was worth preserving, I created something.